Well, okay, maybe we'll start. I'm Emma. I'm the co-chair of Green Party Women, and I'm going to be one of the speakers today. So it's really nice to see some new faces. Can't see everyone's faces, new names. So yeah, welcome to our conference. Tina, we can't hear you.
Maybe it was something you did when you switched over the
Yeah, I've gone back to same as system. Does that work?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I think it's when I want to screen share later that I switch it across. Okay, so I'm Tina Rothery. I'm with the Blackpool and Fylde Green Party. I'm one of the speakers this morning. And I just want to really thank Green Party Women for pulling together these really informative meetings. I've enjoyed every one I've been to so far. It might be because I'm particularly enjoying the Zoom aspect. It means we get so many more people in the room than we can just at a conference. And the variety of opinions is so much more broad. I really enjoy this. So yeah, thank you very much for today.
Hi, I'm Linda Pepper in Berwick-upon-Tweed, just under the Scottish border. So I'm a member of my local Green Party, but also some of us are setting up something called, I have to think, Climate Action Berwick and Borders, to sort of cross that whole border area. Okay, that's me.
Hi, Linda. Does anyone else want to introduce themselves?
Hey guys, my name's Rajia. I forgot that it was that letter. I'm still in my dressing gown and my hair is all messy. But I'm really glad to be here today, and I can't wait for the discussion. I really can't, and it's great to meet everybody.
Hello, Roger.
Hello.
Hello, I'm Carolyn from Leamington Spa. Used to be in the Green Party many years ago, left and now joined again. And thank you to Dawn for sorting out the connection. It wouldn't work for ages and then she sorted it out. So thank you very much, Dawn.
And I'll say I'm Moira Dunworth. I live in Edinburgh, so I don't have a local party. So hello to the lady in Berwick. That's just down the road, and we'll be moving the border shortly because there's a bit of demand from that part of the world. So you're good. So hang on in there. So it's lovely. It's lovely. It's lovely to be here.
Morning, everyone.
Sorry, you go ahead.
Okay, morning, everyone. I'm Cleo. I'm in Bristol. I'm a Green Party councillor here and have been since 2016. But I would love to visit Scotland because my heritage is Scottish, so happy to connect with anyone outside of this. Also, on a point of being a bit nosy, Tina, are you any relation to Anna in Liverpool?
The mayor, do you mean?
Yeah.
No, and I was so hoping we were. I don't know. I mean, and apparently someone sent me the image and said, oh my God, there's actually even a similarity.
There is.
Yeah, I think there is somewhere in our distance, but yeah, I would love to explore that further. Yeah, that was sent to me. I was really chuffed with that.
I'm Janine. I'm North East Green Party Regional Committee Rep, and we're just sort of tootling around doing our thing at the moment, and I'm really pleased to be joining this meeting. I hate speaking in front of people, so which will be very obvious, and I'd rather have my throat cut and tongue ripped out or whatever else like that. So if I sound as if I'm gabbling like an idiot, it'll be because I am. So sorry about that.
I'd point out, Janine, that one of the most comfortable places to speak is amongst Green Party women, because really we all know essentially we're probably in our pajama bottoms and no one cares if you have a towel on your head.
I'm Hilary Wilson. I'm in Liverpool, member of the Green Party, but looking for ways to becoming more active. Looking forward to hearing from all of you this morning. Thank you.
I see my sister Julie and co-chair of Blackpool and Fylde Green Party is in the room, but she hasn't gone unmuted yet. Morning, Julie. She lives next door. I'm surprised I haven't seen her yet.
Jennifer wanted to say something. Is that right?
Yes, I'm from the south of England, Seem to be the only one here at the moment from the south, in East Sussex, and I'm in the Wilden Green Party, the local party.
Well, welcome,
Belinda?
even if you're the only one.
Belinda?
You're not the only one. I'm in Lyme Regis. I'm in the Dorset Green Party. I'm a Lyme Regis town councillor, and I've been trying to sort of drive the climate action in Lyme, not altogether successfully, but I've been networking with lots of like-minded councillors across Dorset, and I'm thinking of setting up a Build Back Better group here as well to kind of, I think people are saying now people don't like the words emergency or even climate. So if we talk about Build Back Better and health and well-being and things like that, it seems to be the way to go. So trying anyway.
Brilliant.
Hello, I'm from Surrey. I'm the North Surrey Green Party, and really just wanting to know more about it. I've been going to lots of their rep training things they've had online, because previous to lockdown, my working hours were the sort of thing that I couldn't really commit to anything. So the Zoom has been really, really helpful in being able to connect with other people. Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's getting on for 10 past. I don't know whether people want to start. What do you think? Okay.
Yes, I think if you introduce, and I can just let people in if there's more coming in at the end.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Dawn. Right, so today we've got 3 speakers. We've got Tina, myself and Catherine, and this conference is called Powering Up to Take on Energy, so that's what we're going to be discussing. If you want to ask questions, you can put them in the chat. What we'll do, Tina will speak first, and then we'll have a few minutes if you want to ask questions for Tina. Then I'll speak, a few minutes if you want to ask questions for me, then Catherine, and then a bit of time for questions at the end if people want to do that. So without further ado, shall we kick it off? Tina, over to you.
Hi. So this morning when I was asked to speak today, it was on what subject that I got to choose the subject, which was really exciting because I have spent a decade talking about fracking, and I can't tell you how much I despise that word. And if I never had to say it again, I'd be very, very happy. Fortunately, we're currently in a state where we have a moratorium on it. So no, it's not a win, but we did murder the industry financially, which was part of the aim. So I think we could well be onto a winner there. And apart from anything else, although we haven't stopped it completely and it doesn't cover all forms of unconventional energy extraction, what we have succeeded in doing is taking out one of those types. So I think we need to rejoice more. I know that when we got the moratorium, a lot of people complained that because it wasn't a ban, it wasn't a real win. But, you know, we're so quick to beat ourselves with sticks, and so rare do we actually bring out the pom-poms to go, hey, you know what, we did this. We did this diligently for 10 years and we didn't stop until we got them to stop. So I think that the anti-fracking movement across this country has been amazing. And there's absolutely no denying that the reason for that was the stubborn diligence of women, I would say. You know, when we first started doing the public meetings to alert areas to the fact that there was a fracking license in their area, we do the public meeting and I'd look out of the room and the low-hanging fruit was the women. You know, they would engage with you very quickly. They got it because the things we were addressing was the chemicals used in fracking that affected your instance of breast cancer, affected your fertility, your ability to carry a baby full term, that the Utah midwives had more baby graves than they'd ever had. It was tragic, it was awful, and it hit women first physically. So because of that, I think we managed to engage a lot of women. And what I hadn't realized ever in my life, the impact of bringing together a group of women who, once you gave them the truth, would not let go of that because it was a threat to their kids. And watching that in action is what I watched for the last decade. But in doing that, I think we came to it to protest very differently. So not looking at the fracking aspect now, we look at how do we do protest. And right now we have Black Lives Matters. We can see how the media is portraying that. We can see the spin. We can see how they only zoom in on the violence of the people they wish to degrade, and that we can see that everything is manipulated in media. So the only way to get around that, I found for us particularly, and it kind of came naturally, was to do a lot of knitting, a lot of tea drinking, a lot of looking very sweet, a lot of playing on your own weaknesses. And if you were slow, be slow. That slowed down trucks. If you were small like me, you'd nip under police lines, duck and dive. There was lots of things you could use to your advantage you never imagined you could. And that the less like a great big scary activist you were, the more likely people would engage. Because when you're asking people to come and stand alongside you to campaign or to protest, you can't make it the ugliest, most brutal thing they've ever done. And it does become ugly, and it does become brutal. And I've spent time in courtrooms and jail cells, and I've been damaged by police. And I get all that needs to be spoken about. But I don't want to speak about it as the most important thing, because then I would lose getting anyone in this fight. And it sounds cruel, but we kind of Pied Piper people in. You know, we made the tea, we provided the cake, we put the music on, and we danced. And women came. And the fact that they came and they danced in the driveway of a fracking site was very useful, because then they couldn't get the trucks in. But if instead I had been complaining, and also that was another thing, Lancashire police tried very hard to make the fight about protest and police. And if that had been the focus, then much like Black Lives Matter, we're talking about the functionality of that protest rather than the reason for the protest. And I think that's the thing, is to stay focused. And in staying focused, like say for instance, with fracking, we said, do you agree that this needs to stop? And whatever else you agreed with, whether you were a Conservative, Labour, whatever you were, whatever your other beliefs were, to put all of those things aside and decide one thing together that you can agree on, and not have those big discussions about the things you don't. Because then that's when you tear yourselves apart. So while we stood shoulder to shoulder, even if I didn't agree with all of your other ethics and morals and policies, didn't matter. You were standing next to me shoulder to shoulder on this one thing. And that was really important. And I think the other thing that's important is when I first came into activism, I was constantly being told by, experienced activists, which I suppose is where I am now, what I should and shouldn't do, and that this was the right thing and that was the wrong thing. And in the end, I think I never found the type of activist I wanted to be amongst the types that already existed. So we just created it ourselves, and that was amazing. We were doing media in the early days, and it was saying, eco warriors, climate campaigners, and I thought, I'm none of those things. I'm a really scared grandma. And I'm scared for my granddaughter's future. And that's the only reason I'm here. So that was when we ended up calling ourselves Nanas. And then all of a sudden I'm on the news and it says, Tina Rothery, Nana. And instead of looking away from the telly and thinking, well, that's not me, people are like, why is there a Nana on the television? Why would that be? It was a human connection. And again, it's like, even when you look at these sorts of things that we do now, being the human that you are, not trying to impress with your professionalism, your skills and your expertise, just being real and true and honest. There were, if I could just share one of the things that made it particularly strong in portraying ourselves as soft women, was that we had 3 knitting circles in front of the gates. And each little circle was 6 to 8 women in 3 little sets. And we were just knitting. And the police thought it was nothing, it was not important, just a bunch of women knitting. When the trucks come, we'll just move them out of the way, it'll be no bother. So we had a good hour's knitting before we actually had the trucks try to come in. But what the police hadn't noticed was that we were all wearing woolly handcuffs, and that all our woolly handcuffs were lightly woven into the wool together. And that wool was then lightly woven into the chairs and between us into the knitting basket. So that as we continued to knit, we became a ball of wool, essentially, that was very hard to break up. So when the police came in and said, right, time to separate, let's get you all apart, and they started to try and pull us apart, they realized we'd actually woven ourselves together, and there was not really going to be as easy as they thought. And one of the policemen said to me, he said, "Oh, Tina," he said, "this could be conceived as almost a lock-on." And I looked at him and I was like, "You did see the event on Facebook. We called it a yarn-on. I don't think it could have been any more obvious what we were going to do." But what was really interesting was at the time that the women were knitting, the stronger activists, maybe a lot of the young male activists, came to our aid, and it was really sweet of them to come to our aid. But we didn't want the aid. I wanted to look small. I wanted to show how far are these police willing to go for the sake of this industry on a bunch of knitting grandmas. I mean, that's just an affront. If you see a policeman tearing into a young guy with rasta hair or, or something, then then they perceive that as it's a fair fight. But when you can put a bunch of people together who it doesn't look a fair fight with, and we've never had a decent Daily Mail heading in our lives, obviously, the Daily Mail being what it is. But as they tore me away from my chair, I started wrapping the wool around my neck. I have no idea why. It was a really stupid move because the lady next to me moved her chair and nearly killed me. And but as the police got it, they were cutting all the wool away, and they lifted my chair with me on it and dragged me off. And then they threw my head back and used a knife to cut the wool. Now, this was of no danger to me and it wasn't scary, but oh my God, and that Daily Mail image and headline it was, because it said, 50 Lancashire cops bear down on 18 knitting OAPs. Beautiful. It was everything we wanted. And it was totally, I think you have to be unexpected in protests. It can't just be angriness. You must find ways, and also to make it inclusive. Because there are an awful lot of people who, there's a screen share about to happen that looks dangerous. There's an awful lot of people who go, "I can't be an activist like you because." And if you take that because and you make it your reason to be, Ann Power is what, 83, 84 years old. And most women, like in her, with a walking stick, and she would normally be the sort of person you'd expect to say, "I can't be because I'm not able-bodied." But her lack of speed meant that when she walked in front of a truck, no one was going to move her because she was an older lady. I mean, they did at some point. They dragged her across the road, not lifting her feet, and they dragged her heels all the way across the cops. But she used that, and she used it, and we used the images, and we made sure that people understood that there was this abuse of everyday residents by the police and by the state, and showed that up, but never became them. If the number of times I say this, and I'm the worst for it. I started live streaming everything because we needed the evidence, and also because I felt like we needed to have a perspective that wasn't just shouty anger and not just focusing on the angry bits, and trying not to swear so that I could share it with my nieces. But as it was, I ended up being probably amongst the worst for the sweariness, and I try not to be, but you try to retain your temper in a protest, but it's very difficult. But you do need to. We went down as en masse, 100 women to London, and we went down dressed as suffragettes, and we went down to go to Parliament Square to make a point, and then to go across to the business offices to make a stand there. I think it's BEIS now, but it was whatever it was before. And when we did that, there were a lot of other activists in London at the time with angry signs and angry faces, and we did what we always do, which is sign up, smile on, and wave. And people engage, that's, you step into activism. If the guy in the car beeps back, that may be the first time he's ever supported activism, and I think it was really important to do that. So over the years, we've done all sorts of different things, and I would recommend that, we talk about protesting and campaigning, and sadly, what might start as a campaign will inevitably turn into a protest when the government doesn't heed what is being asked. But you do need to keep it light, keep it fun, because if you're going to be at this for a very long time, you need to go into it knowing that it's not going to be miserable and horrible. I mean, we live for Wednesdays. Every Wednesday, the women had a 15-minute silence at the gates. And don't forget, this went on for 3 years. So that was a lot of silences. So you can't just stand there in silence for 15 minutes. So we built a 4-hour repertoire around it, which included dances that we taught ourselves. We taught ourselves to play samba band. We taught ourselves all sorts of things that would keep us busy and fun and active and united. And it was strange with that 15-minute silence, because although it was unifying for the women who took part, because it was Women's Wednesdays, there was also the bonding or the awareness of a shared sense of time and experience for the police, for the security guards, for the other activists, and for onlookers who weren't maybe part of that silence, but everybody would fall silent. And I remember on the second one we did, someone started doing a hedge cutting behind me, and one of the police broke the line, shot across and said, "Shh, it's the silence." And I was like, oh my God. How weird is that? And the same way that the security guards, had I been on the opposite team, I'd have blasted a radio. I'd have been a real demon about it, you know, because they didn't have to abide, but they did. They all fell silent. You know, to try and get some respect for the human that you are, rather than anger for the activist that you are, is, I think, what you've got to strive to achieve, and the easiest thing to do, because just being you, not being what you perceive as an activist, you know. And we were really blessed too. We were lucky to have, you know, in the beginning, we got Vivienne Westwood came on board, and the nanas went on a tank with her to declare war on fracking at David Cameron's house, which was really a hoot anyway. And I remember getting slandered by other activists who were more determined, going, "You guys just celebrities, it's a fluff piece." But it wasn't, because here's what happened that night. That night on Twitter, I read Nylon magazine, had an article in there, and they all loved Vivienne Westwood. So there were fans of Vivienne Westwood in Japan for this magazine. And everyone was suddenly reading about fracking when normally they were reading about Vivienne and Nylon. And then I went on a 5-day tour with her and others on this tour bus to cities across the UK. And Vivienne was really sensible. She only ever went on at the end because she knew people had come to see her. So she'd let us all do our talking about the fracking, then she'd do her end bit. They're very useful and very kind, and not to write anyone off. Emma Thompson took a field with us, and her sister Sophie and my sister Julie. So we all took this field where there was going to be fracking at 5 or 6 in the morning with Greenpeace. And then we created a bake-off, the Great British Bake-Off, in a field with recycled cakes about wind farms and solar, and we got sprayed by manure, by the farmer, but they were such good sports. And again, the stuff that goes wrong even gave us good leverage. So I would just say that I think I know a lot of people who are scared of the word activist and protest. And I would just attest, along with the 90 other women that I fondly call nanas, that none of us has ever done anything we weren't brave and we didn't feel we could do. I never felt I had to. And everything we did was a pure delight to us. And although the outcomes were sometimes painful or involved legal consequences, everything was on my terms, because I think you stand as an autonomous activist alongside people who are just like you doing the same thing, you know, but you don't have to agree to all the terms. So that's sort of it in a nutshell, really, about how it worked for us. And I would just want to encourage, particularly, I suppose it is particularly women, because I'm just going to give you one last example, which is Mary Doig. She's a woman in her late 70s, fairly isolated in a community. Her husband died some time ago. She lived in this community because that was where his family and people were, but everyone she knew had gone. And she'd been fairly silent in the community, I think. And she came to find us and see what was going on, and got a little bit bossy about the way we were presenting the cakes and the knitting, and that we weren't knitting right, and that she would teach us to knit. Anyway, so Mary Doig bossily took over the knitting, taught every one of us to knit properly, and produced the most amazing things called Nana Magic blankets that we'd then give to other people who were staying on camps, or, you know, just people we felt could benefit from these lovely blankets. And we got women across the world to knit pieces of wool that we could then turn into these blankets. Ideas that I would never have had, and that I can't think of many other activist groups that would have had. But and Mary now is a huge part of our world. So I think that, I always remember thinking that even if it all failed, the ultimate goal fails, or you haven't reached it yet, you have to find the things you got right along the way and say, yay. You know, every day we won, every day that Mary Doig wasn't at home and she was with us, enriching us with her knowledge and company, to me was a win. You know, there are lots of wins beside your ultimate goal, and I think you find those along the way. Yeah, it's been a heck of a journey. I have a 3.5-minute film, but I don't think there's time for it now. But if you want to, we can sort of put that on at the end. But it really does show, and I just like it because it shows all the faces of these people who are so like us. They're just everyday folk who did some pretty damned amazing things for the last 10 years. That's me. Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Tina. That was amazing. Okay. I couldn't see any questions in the chat, but if anyone's got a few questions, we'll do a few questions now if you've got anything burning to say, or else we'll crack on. So I'm going to kind of look out for hands. And if not,
there was a question in the chat.
Okay, sorry, I missed that. I wrote a question. Okay,
Roger.
Roger.
What alternatives should Greens argue for as an alternative to fracking?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
What alternative should Greens argue for as an alternative to fracking?
There's two ways of answering that question. One is my natural question, which is really rude and just says, it's my job to stop the gun. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm there to stop the gun, not tell you which alternative to use. So as far as I'm concerned, this is so bad and so dangerous for each individual and the planet, regardless of whatever else there is. You don't choose this option. It should never have been on the table. The alternatives are numerous. I worked with Gina Dowding when she was MEP and with Catherine Rowett, and some of the amazing stuff that we produced with regard to the Green New Deal for the Northwest. I've read the Build Back Better. There is so much that we can do, and there's a film coming out of Australia that's worth looking at. I think it's called 2040. And what they did was these clever minds and scientists and academics checked everything, every resource we have available to us now. Could we stop fossil fuel use instantly? And what would happen to us if we did? And it works out that they've actually got everything we need if we just utilize it correctly. And again, I went on a tour in Northern Ireland. We did we were going to different councils to try and get them to divest. And what they did there was they did an assessment of what would happen if you took all of the money that was invested by councils in fossil fuels and you removed the fossil fuel aspect but didn't add anything else in. Where would you be at that point? And at that point, you were actually better off because there's less risk. And there was no suffering with regards to how those investments were working. I mean, I'm not sure how it would be now because the world's an economic mess. But certainly at the time, you know, we're told, oh, you can't live without fossil fuels and you can't divest from them. But you really can. And there are plenty of experts who will tell you we can. And those who are telling you we can't are invested in the industry in some way.
Yeah, I'd agree. And we are going to hear from Catherine, who has got the plan. Okay, if there's no more questions, I'll crack on, and I'm going to do a little bit about nuclear power. Right, I've got some slides for this. I've got to say a couple of things. I've not really spoken in public much before. I call this public, even though I'm in my kitchen. So I'm sorry if I'm going to ramble on a bit, and I'm a bit nervous, but I'm going to use some slides just because that will help me. Also, I feel a bit of a fraud doing this because I've noticed we've got Jennifer Kirtley in the room, who is also in our group and is a stalwart campaigner against Sizewell C, the nuclear power station. And really, compared to her, I've done nothing. But anyway, I'm going to give it a go. So here's my slides. Right. Let me just minimize that. Okay, so this is, well, this is actually Minsmere Bird Reserve. This is next to Sizewell in Suffolk, on the Suffolk coast. Beautiful area of outstanding natural beauty, Ramsar site, special protection site. Every designation you want to put on this site is there. You wouldn't be able to build anything on this site if you weren't gonna, you know, if you wanted to build a house on it, if you wanted to build anything else, you wouldn't be able to. What I don't know how to do is how to do my next slide. Oh, never really thought about that. Hang on.
Use the arrow key.
Yeah, I've tried that. It's not working. Hang on. Oh, wait. Oh, that's not a very good start. So let's give it another go. Right. Ah, okay. I don't know what I did there, but I did something. Right. So here you go. Is another picture of Sizewell C. Here you can see Sizewell A and Sizewell B. And you can see this is right next to the sea, not a place where you want to build a nuclear power station at all. So what we used to do is, I've been, you know, I've sort of done a bit of direct action, and we used to go down there. They touted building Sizewell C about 10 years ago. So we used to go down, me and a group of friends used to go down to Sizewell and do various protests, block the road, etc. Now, I live in a town about 20 miles away from Sizewell. So obviously, to me, if Sizewell goes up, you know, it's going to affect me, but I'm not a local. I'm not a local person. And the people I was with did not live in the town. They weren't from the town. It's a rural area. It's quite remote. So there isn't really, you know, a large network of people that live close together. The nearest town is Leiston. It's about a mile away. That's a town of about 6,000 people. But, you know, we were from scattered around Suffolk, but we used to go down there and do sort of lock-ons and protests, get it in the papers, get it in the press. And then we started to hold Sizewell camps. So this was a camp we had. We did this for about 3 years running. And the aim of the camp was to kind of try and educate people about what was coming, because the problem is there's so much information put out by EDF and by the sort of like the companies that they look glossy. They've got all the answers. They skim over the problems. You know, I remember hearing on the radio, the kind of boss of Sizewell B was asked about the waste problem and said, oh no, we've solved the waste problem. We're going to put it in a deep geological facility. It's not a problem. We've solved it. Yeah, you don't know where that deep geological facility is going to be. You haven't built it. You haven't got any clue about it, but you've solved the problem of the waste. So we used to hold these camps to try and let people know about the sort of the problems with it, you know, the coastal erosion, the flooding, everything else that was going on, and to engage with people. And what we'd do when we held a camp, we'd get people down. But the thing is, a lot of the people coming down weren't from the area. You know, they were from our network of activists. So we'd have people coming down from London and people coming from other areas, but they weren't actually local people, and it was quite difficult to engage with local people on these issues, you know, in the town of Leiston. So what we'd do, we'd set up boards with information on, and sometimes we'd put these a little bit away from the camp so that people didn't feel they had to actually talk to us, you know, because we were seen as these kind of interlopers, these hippies that used to come down and take over. And a lot of people would come past, but a lot of the people were tourists, so they weren't actually from the area. You know, it's a massive tourist area, which obviously might not be in the future if they build Sizewell C, but there you go. So we'd put up all these boards, and we'd have information about things like, you know, these are pictures from the insects at Chernobyl that were kind of had mutations. And what we try to concentrate on as well is jobs, because the town, the reason why it was very difficult to engage with local people is the town relies on the jobs from the power station. You know, most of the people in Leiston know someone who works at the power station or works at the power station. You know, it's a popular thing to do to have the Sizewell C come in, because there's a promise of jobs. You know, 25,000 jobs have been promised, which is actually not 25,000 jobs, 25,000 job roles, which is a very different thing. But, you know, it's very difficult to engage with people. So at these camps, we'd try and hold public meetings. You know, we'd book the community centre or something, and we'd advertise a public meeting. We'd all go from the camp, and maybe there'd be 3 locals there. You know, it didn't kind of work because we were coming in from outside. So then what happened was there was a meeting held at Snape Maltings, which was very posh, and it was supposed to be a public meeting, and we kind of wanted to go along, so we kind of booked to go along, and we weren't allowed to go, and nor were the other the anti-nuclear groups in the town, because we weren't the only ones going down there. You know, there was already CANE, which is Community Against Nuclear Expansion, and Shut Down Sizewell B, but we hadn't really sort of come across or worked with those people before. But because then they banned everybody from going to this meeting who was anti-nuclear, we all sort of got together after that and went, right, we need to work together. And the thing is that these people, like this is Joan Gurley in the middle, who's lived in Leiston all her life. She's been a councillor. She knows the people. She knows the area like the back of her hand. Now, you know, we started to work together, us protesters, us group coming from outside as direct action kind of advocates, came to work with the people who were very much kind of in the vein of being councillors and working through that way. And it wasn't the easiest thing. And what I'm going to say now is a little bit about, you know, the problems with working together. Whilst I agree with Tina that you kind of got this shared goal and you should need to focus on this goal. And I think sometimes you can kind of go like, we should all be focused on this and nothing else should matter. But actually it's quite difficult for different people to come and work together. And there's tensions arise over things that you think shouldn't arise. So what we found fairly early on was it was quite important to set quite strict rules about what we were and weren't going to do in the name of task. You know, so nobody was going to do anything illegal under the name of task, because, you know, they weren't into protesting as we were. They weren't into lying on the road. That wasn't going to be done in the name of task. Also, we were quite strict on everything that we put out needed to be factual, because there were some people who wanted to be a bit hyperbolic and kind of put out leaflets claiming everyone was going to die and all this kind of thing. We went, no, you can't do that. So in the end, what really sort of happened is rather than there being one big group, there was more of a network of groups. So we work with Suffolk Coastal Friends of the Earth, for instance, and you know, shut down Sizewell, and now there's another group, Stop Sizewell C. And they're more of a loose network, and people can be members of each group, but it means that you don't have to sort of all try and cram into one way of working. And the other thing is, because sometimes you find in groups like this, there'll be people who are very dominant personalities, because let's face it, people who are going to stand up and protest against something are going to be quite, you know, confident, dominant personalities sometimes. And some people will want to be quite controlling and have kind of the group to be quite small and everything controlled. And other people, the aim that they want to achieve is to have as many people as possible, you know, but their membership might not actually be doing much. So it's a good idea to kind of think about what you want your group to do. What is the aim of your particular group? So, you know, with this loose network of groups, you know, if Suffolk Coastal Friends of the Earth put on an event, we'll advertise it as task and we'll go along and support them, and vice versa. And that's how it's kind of working, and it seems to be working okay. Now, where am I going next? Right. Yes. So, now, this has been going on for 10 years, this period of them proposing Sizewell C. And most of the time, what's happening is not a lot, because there's over the 10 years, they've done consultations. We've had 4 consultations, and plus a consultation on emergency planning, plus a consultation on the overall energy strategy of the UK. And we respond to all of these consultations, but in between that, it seems almost like not a lot is happening, and it's quite hard to keep a group going. And now people like Jennifer Kirtley have gone every month, they have a meeting, and you know, they've kind of been plugging away at this for 10 years, because you need to keep that group going, because when the consultations do happen, you need everyone to be on board, and it's no good letting everyone loose and dip while nothing's happening and then trying to build it all up again. So, you know, month after month, the people at task have been sort of like having meetings, and they do a lot of things like writing to the papers, you know, trying to keep it in the public interest, in the public kind of realm. So everything they can, they pick up on something, write to the local papers, you know. And for people like me, like I live 20 miles away, and it used to take me quite a long time to go to meetings because I don't drive, you know, I'd go on the train and then cycle 4 miles and then cycle 4 miles back and back on the train. It's quite difficult. So I did things like more of the website and social media. You can do that kind of thing. So you have to keep people engaged because of the consultations when they come. Oh my God. The thing is, with these consultations, with EDF, I would say do not trust companies like EDF. You think sometimes, oh, maybe these people will, you know, have integrity. They know what they're talking about. They're not. This company is so bad. They will lie. They will obfuscate. They don't give you the information. You have consultation documents of 300 pages long with virtually no information in it, you know, and basically the idea is to swamp you with this information so that you can't really kind of wade through everything, and you can't find what the real issues are. But you have to wade through. And I tell you what, I found this side of things much more difficult than the direct action side of things. You know, reading through consultation documents that you know they're going to destroy the countryside that you love. You know that they're going to absolutely devastate somewhere like Minsmere. And yet you're reading through this document telling you how wonderful this project's going to be, how they're going to mitigate for all of the devastation, how the wildlife is going to be fine because they're just going to pick it up from one area and bung it in another area. You know, all of this is really hard to read, but you have to do it, because one of the things that you have to pick out is what they're not saying in the document as well as what they are saying. So we looked through this, and for instance, we noticed that they didn't say anything about where they were going to get the water from. Nuclear power stations, although it's on the coast, it uses seawater for cooling. It also needs a lot of fresh water. Now in East Anglia, it's the driest region in the UK. We're short on water, we really are. Looking at the future water plans for this area, due to climate change, we're really, really going to be short of water. So Sizewell C will take 2 million litres of fresh water per day, right? And this is fresh water that goes into the cooling systems. So it's not that you can switch it off in a drought, or, you know, you need that water all the time. You need that water there every day. So if you look at it, you go, okay, we live in a really, really dry area where climate change is going to affect the water here, and it's in one of the top 3 dangers that is predicted from climate change is the lack of fresh water. And yet you're going to build a power station here that takes 2 million litres of fresh water per day. What's going to happen during a drought to the people of the town? Is their water going to be cut off? You know, so we started looking into this, and I looked at this is the Essex and Suffolk Water Resources Plan. You look at that and you go, that's the future projections from Essex and Suffolk Water. They don't mention Sizewell C in it. So we said, like, okay, so where's your plan for Sizewell C? Where is water going to come from? And they said, oh, well, Sizewell C hasn't really been built yet, so we not factored that into our plans because it might not happen. And then we went to Sizewell C and said, where are you going to get the water from? And they said, oh, we're going to get it from Essex and Suffolk Water. And we're like, okay. So then we wrote to the Environment Agency and said, you know, looking at this, there's not enough water. Where's the water coming from? And it turns out that there isn't enough water. They don't know where the water's coming from. 10 years down the line, they're putting their DCO, they're applying to build this thing, and they still don't know where the water's coming from. And after 4 consultations of us asking where they're going to get the water from, they still haven't made it clear at all. So part of this thing of looking at the consultations is finding out what they're not telling you, including, you know, as well as what they are telling you. It's also the importance of the local information, and knowing the details is really important, because one of the things you do find out as well is that they'll have these glossy kind of brochures, and they'll have these public consultations where you've got people who are very polite and they'll give you tea and biscuits and you'll go in there chatting, and you find out that they don't really know much about the area. Now, this was the emergency planning building. After Fukushima, it was decided that each power station needed emergency planning, an off-site emergency planning kind of building. So this is about a mile away from the power station. And we went along to look at this, and they were very proud of the things like the green roof and the environmental, you know, kind of like, I don't know, it was very green and very energy efficient and all the rest of it. And we said, all right, you're a mile away from Sizewell B. So in the event of an emergency, how are you, and if there's an emergency, the roads are going to be crowded because people are going to be trying to get out of that area. So how are you going to get to the power station? And they said, it's all right, we've got some all-terrain vehicles. So all right then. And they say, what if it's flooded? Because this is in a flood zone, you know, coastal erosion plus a flood zone. You know, great place to build a power station. And they said, no, our all-terrain vehicles will go across the field, we'll be able to get there. And I said, okay, these vehicles can go up to a meter's depth of water. So, but you know, if you go across that way, if you look at the geography, you've got 2 meter dips there. So you're going to be going across fields in a flood and dipping down 2 meters. How's that going to work in your all-terrain vehicle that can go up to a meter in water? And they hadn't actually thought that through. They hadn't actually considered that those sort of details of how they would actually get to the power station from this emergency planning centre in the event of a flood. So it's really important to sort of pick things up where you have local knowledge. And the other thing is, talking about EDF lying, this I picked off their website the other day. Now EDF boasted that 25,000 jobs will be provided at Sizewell, you know, it will create 25,000 jobs. And we challenged this and we looked at where they got the figure from. And we worked out that actually this 25,000 jobs was 25,000 job roles. And they didn't really say this. And a job role, we asked, what is a job role? And some of these job roles might only be of a month's duration or 2 months duration. And they're touting this as a job. Now, if I was looking for a job and I got that job and I was told it only lasts for 2 months, I don't think I'd be very impressed. And so once we challenged EDF about this, they started to use the term job roles, and they don't refer to jobs now, but they refer to 25,000 job roles. But obviously it's out there. David Cameron stood in Parliament and said, oh, it's going to create 25,000 jobs, you know, and this is a recent letter from Len McCluskey from the Unite Union, who again repeated it's 25,000 jobs. Now EDF took that letter knowing full well that it's not 25,000 jobs, it's 25,000 job roles, some of which may only last a month. But they took that letter knowing that it was had errors in it, knowing that this was a lie, and they put that on their website. You know, so this is, you can't trust them. They will lie, they will obfuscate, they won't tell you the truth. Now, one of the things that was very important, and what Jenny and what people have been doing over the last 10 years to keep this going, is really get on board with the councillors and the local councils. When we first started this, when we went along as protesters, the council hated us. You know, we had a meeting with the council when we set up the Sizewell camp on the beach, and they wanted to stop us doing it. But we pointed out that actually people camping on the beach was quite common, because fishermen used to go down there and stay overnight on the beach. So a fisherman can go and stay overnight on the beach and do their night fishing. Why couldn't we go and stay on the beach? So, you know, we kind of, and anyway, we said we're going to do it anyway. So the council was not very keen on us. But what Task has done over the last 10 years is work away at the council. So we did things like look at the job numbers, and we wrote a report about actually this is what the job numbers are. This is what the effect of the jobs will be. Because, you know, when Sizewell B was built, yeah, you've got jobs, but a lot of those jobs are not for local people. They're for people coming from outside. So what you had when Sizewell B was built was a lot of people coming from outside, usually young single men, you know, or young men coming. And what it brought to the town was drug problems. What it brought to the town was people being harassed, you know, especially young women being harassed. So it's not all positive, you know. So do you want sort of another sort of 3,000 people coming into your town of 6,000 people? Because, you know, these things are what we spoke to the council about. And also, you know, pointing out the things like the problems with the water, the problems with the waste, the things that EDF don't want us to talk about. So now we're in a situation where the councils, a lot of the councils, certainly at parish level, are really on board with us. They themselves are really worried about, you know, what the plans are from EDF, because they know that EDF haven't told them the truth. So now we've got a situation where all the parish councils are really concerned about this, and we're hoping that the county council is actually going to have a vote on the 7th of July, and there's going to be a motion put to them where they will stop their support for Sizewell C, and actually kind of take a more nuanced, balanced, neutral stance, because at the moment they are in favour of Sizewell C. So there's going to be a vote there, and hopefully they will take away their in-principle support for Sizewell C. And that has been the work over sort of 10 years of building up and meeting with the council. And, you know, like Tina said, we don't know whether we'll win, but I will take as a win maybe just being able to delay it. Because the other thing that we're doing is we've got a judicial review going on. And when I say we, I mean all the people that have been working really hard in task, and especially people like Joan Gerling, who is quite a heroine of mine. They've taken the government to court because, as well as not being able to trust EDF, don't trust the government because, you know, the government will break their own rules. They don't stick to their own rules. They don't stick to the laws. So you have to challenge them. So the judicial review we're having at the moment is because the EDF want to cut down a wood to build a visitor centre and a car park on an area of outstanding natural beauty that you wouldn't be able to put a shed up, you know, but they want to knock the wood down to build a visitor centre and a car park. So we've got a challenge in to stop them. Now we might well, you know, lose that challenge because, you know, like I say, the government won't follow their own rules. A lot of the planning rules are kind of rubber stamped through. You know, if there was any sense in the world, this would have been stopped years ago, because building a nuclear power station on an eroding coast on a flood zone, you know, is really not very bright. But you know, we're really trying, and those tactics, even if they delay it, it will give time for more renewables to come in. It will drain EDF of resources. I mean, EDF is a company that is over 70 billion euros in debt and liabilities, and we're, the British taxpayer, are going to be propping them up. If we can delay it for long enough, maybe those kind of holes in their finances will be enough to stop it. Because otherwise, we're going to turn areas like this into, oh, come on. Oh, my computer stopped working now. Oh, there you go. Into this. Now, this is thing, you know, and that will break my heart, and that will break the hearts of people around there. And I can't bear to see this. So whilst I think it's really important to engage in all the consultations and jump through all the hoops, you have to do that. You have to kind of build your case against it, even though you know the likelihood is it's going to be rubber stamped through. And when it is, I'll be back on the beach, because, you know, but you have to do those, you have to jump through those hoops first, because otherwise, when you end up in court and they say, well, why did you do it? You have to be able to say, we wrote to the planners, we wrote to our politicians, we campaigned for the council, we did everything in our power that we could to stop this through the channels that you gave us, and yet you're still building it. So I'm sorry, but I'm getting back out there if I need to. I really hope I don't, but if I do, I'm going to. Anyway, I'm going to stop sharing now. There you go. That's my presentation.
Tina had a question in the chat. Can you? Yes. Thank you.
That was fascinating, because basically you explained such a similar journey, and then I was reading in the comments too that, you know, the journey we have, the same brick walls we reach, you know, the lies about the figures, the overload of information you have to wade through. I remember getting a 7,000 word document and knowing I could not tackle it in the early days. But this is where the diversity of your group comes in handy, I suppose, because we were lucky. We had a guy who, he wasn't really good in a team. He didn't hang out well with others, but he would work alone. And if you sent him something and said, I can't make head nor tail of this, he was pedantic and would tear it apart. And Anne Fielding mentioned earlier as well, what you were saying about when they put on these fake meetings with tea and biscuits. And the people that are there giving you the information to answer your questions aren't experts in the field, they're PR guys. Yeah. I can't think of, I went to countless meetings, and we used to be outside giving out alternative information. But in the meeting, I would ask a question and I'd be told by a PR guy, wow, that's a great question. Write that down and we're going to email you the answer. And not once in 10 years did I ever get an answer back. You know, it's all, and you also said about the relationship with the locals. I think that was really key. So having people working behind the scenes, but what did you have with regard to a relationship with the local community? Because obviously without that, you can't have that foundation. I mean, that's so vital, isn't it? So did you have anyone in the local community, existing groups that you could connect with or build relationships with?
Yeah, that was when we went down as kind of initially as protesters, we didn't, but gradually we did build up with the local people, like Jennifer Kirtley, who's sitting there, I can see her now, and Joan and Pete Wilkinson, and they are all local people. But the main issue is, in a town like that, is the jobs. because if you against the power station, it's really difficult because it's people's livelihoods. So you really have to kind of prove to them or try and show that this is going to be damaging for the tourism. It's not going to be good for the town. In fact, I don't know, Jenny, do you want to say anything? Because I've seen you've unmuted yourself.
Well, I think the problem is for us all this time is that this build is so much larger than the size will be, which was bad enough. And I was protesting against that 30 odd years ago. But we find ourselves now in the position that this whole build, instead of being on one platform, is now going to wreck such a huge area. We have a road going across the AOMB. The site, the actual entrance to the site from Sizewell C is now 2 miles inland in the most beautiful, beautiful country lane that hasn't been changed for years. And I shall probably cry in a minute, which I don't want to do, because it is absolutely devastating what they want to do around here. And it is difficult with the locals. Some people are passionate against it. A lot of the young, of course, want these jobs. And they don't understand really what has happened twice in Leiston, for instance. It's boom and bust. You go there now, half the shops are shut, you know, and all the rest. This build lasts for 10 years. Well, maybe in EDF's case, quite a lot longer. They're anything to do with Flamanville. But it's really difficult. But of course, the tourist industry, for instance, will lose hundreds and hundreds of their staff. And that's what we rely on around here. This build is right in between, in the middle of Aldeburgh, famous for Benjamin Britten, and Southwold, famous for its second home £1 million owners. So that you couldn't make it up of a worse place really to put a nuclear power station, which I am totally against, full stop. So it's difficult, but Emma has been doing a brilliant job in between the years when I said I've had enough now. But then of course you see it again and you think, well, I'm gonna have to do something now.
Yeah.
It's difficult, but all the groups are now coming together, which is really good. And as we all thought right from the beginning, this will really get up EDF's nose, as it has. And interestingly enough, over the weekend, Sizewell C, EDF Sizewell C, started up on Twitter an anti-nuclear group. He said, what's this? Somebody phoned me up and said, do you know you're on a group? No. So I looked it up. There was Task, Teagues, which or Stop Sizewell C, and then there was myself and Bill Turnbull, the journalist. So there were 4 of us. And I thought, well, what shall I do? Get angry and phone up EDF? And thought, no, let's have some fun with it. And so we started a bit of a campaign called, we were going to anyway, what was it going to be called? Oh, Join Me Too, because lots of people were saying, how do I join this group? So we had a bit of fun over the weekend and had quite a few tweets, and now EDF have taken it down. So that's been quite good fun.
Yeah.
But anyway, we need all the help we can get, and I think knitting outside the gates might just do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Emma, there was a question from Claudine asking if you had found the Localism Act to be of use.
Not really, because the thing with the Sizewell C is because it's deemed to be a national infrastructure planning of national importance. So because the government have deemed that we need nuclear power stations, which is a whole different ballgame, a whole different argument, because actually that whole analysis was flawed. But anyway, because it's supposed to be of national importance, they can kind of come in and dump it on you, and you don't really get any say in it. That is decided by the government.
I think it's going to be quite an interesting argument with the Chinese involvement. I see this morning in the Times, I haven't read it all yet, I've got to go and get the newspaper, but in the Times there's something about the Trump administration is now getting really angry and say if Hitachi sell Wilfer in Anglesey to the Chinese, there'll be big trouble.
Okay.
So there's a lot of involvement.
Yeah, it's yes.
Getting
anyway,
a bit political.
Yeah, I think we better crack on, because if there's any more questions, we'll answer them quickly. Otherwise, Catherine's been waiting, and it'd be really good. Oh, if she's there. Hello, Catherine. Is that okay with everyone if we have our next speaker introduce Catherine Rohit, former MEP of the Eastern Region?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm sorry that my presentation is going to be much more dull, because I'm not talking about all this wonderful activism and knitting and that sort of thing, but rather because when I was an MEP, obviously we have amazing resources, or we had amazing resources that we could call upon. So my plan was that over the 5 years that I would be there, which would have been nice to have 5 years, I was going to do a series of studies on how to green the east of England in various aspects to do with transport and research and other things. But I started with the energy issue, and so I produced, so I've got I'll wave this at you. This is the published report that I commissioned that looked at how we could get down to a carbon neutral energy system for the east of England, without nuclear, I should say, or without new nuclear, let's say, for the east of England by 2030. We published that in January this year. I should say I've got copies of that, hard copies available if anybody wants a hard copy, or you can download it from my website. And there's also an additional one that looks like this, which you can only get as a PDF, which is the technical report that goes with it. So if you want sort of details of the data and the background and so on about the things, I was just shuffling through them while Emma was talking, because obviously the issue about jobs is a crazy piece of misinformation that is plugged by the nuclear lobby. The idea that there will be more jobs if you get your energy from nuclear than if you get it from renewables is totally false. You get much more, much better jobs and much cheaper electricity if you go for renewables. So if in place of investing in all this hugely expensive and hugely carbon intensive nuclear power plant, which will not bring any power online for years and years. I mean, all the models that they've done so far are way over timescale and way over budget. It never delivers any of the power that is required, but it does embed huge amounts of carbon in the process of building. So it's a complete myth that nuclear energy is either low carbon or carbon neutral. It is not. It is extremely carbon intensive and very damaging to the environment. And that's without calculating the loss of the woods and so on. Just in itself, the process of building a power plant. Instead of that, if you build renewable plants, and we have masses of good offshore wind farms which are coming online very frequently, more every day. They take very little time to build. They're not costly. The offshore ones are a bit more costly than onshore ones. So one of the issues is how can we persuade people that they'd actually prefer to have some onshore wind farms or individual wind turbines for local places, as opposed to a nuclear power station. Because if they had local embedded community power stations with the systems that are locally organized, you would get huge economic benefits for the community that hosts them, including you can run it as a community solar or wind enterprise with profits going into the local community and cheap electricity to go with it. So there are various things that you can do that actually produce better jobs, more jobs, permanent jobs, less damage to the environment, and build up the power resources. So one aspect of the studies that I developed was about improving those things. And yeah, I see somebody has mentioned tidal. So of course, if they put into developing tidal and wave power, the kind of resources that they put into things like fracking and nuclear, we would be well away on meeting many of the power needs. The other aspect of the report is looking at the ways in which we need to reduce demand. So there are two aspects to achieving what we need to achieve by 2030. One is increasing the availability of genuinely carbon zero power. And that I've just mentioned. The other is reduction in demand. So one of the important things is not to think that you can just go one for one, like for like replacement of fossil fuel vehicles with electric vehicles. So that's a no-no, because firstly, there are embedded emissions in the creation of an electric vehicle. And if you replace all the vehicles, that's massively carbon intensive over the next few years, and we can't afford that. Another is the shortage of the precious minerals and the exploitation that goes into the mining of those minerals, which it makes them undesirable. So the batteries and the creation of the vehicles is a no-no. So what are we to do? Well, we need primarily to be looking at mass transit, getting people out of cars and onto either active travel. And of course, the COVID situation has actually altered the details of this a bit. Firstly, in driving people off public transport, at least temporarily, and that's a real problem. And also engaging the government in the need for more active travel, because you can't actually fit that many cars on the road. And if everybody gets into their cars, that will just not work. So, so the whole project needs to involve a change in people's travel modes. And I'm keen to stress not just let's get everybody traveling the same amount as they were before, only do it in a carbon neutral way on the trains or electric buses or whatever it might be. Let's consider why it is that people are wasting so much time traveling. So one of the other things that's happened in the coronavirus period is the realization that people have less stress when they're not actually having to leave home before it gets light and get home after it's dark, never see their children, have no family time, and so on. The commuting that we do in this country is unbelievable. And of course, one of the problems is that it's counted as a good thing because it counts as gross domestic product. And if you measure success by the number of jobs and by the gross domestic product, regardless of whether those jobs and the productivity is in something that is completely wasteful and destructive, then you'll think that running trains that are capacity full of sardine-like people is a good thing. It's not a good thing. It's actually causing enormous distress and wastage of time. Those people jammed in the carriages, unable to sit down, are wasting all that time when they could have been actually doing something that was creative and productive. So travel in itself is not a good thing. But of course, if you have no other way of measuring the success of a society than how many people are in jobs, then it looks as if masses of people traveling is very, very helpful, and it's not. So looking at the travel arrangements and why it's happening is important. And the other thing is the amount of energy that's used in buildings and in industry. So that's the other thing that I analyse in the report. Well, I didn't write the report, I commissioned it, but this is one of the things that we're looking at in that, what are we going to do to reduce the usage in heating our homes and so on. And again, jobs that are actually productive will be created if you focus on trying to incentivize and find regulations and so on that will bring about retrofitting of insulation, conversion to ground source heat pumps and other very low carbon heating systems, and other ways of making sure that we don't waste a whole lot of energy pumping it out through uninsulated roofs and walls, and actually living in a way that is more compatible with the planet that we're on. So those are the things that I'm looking at in the report. I don't want to take up too much time. I could show you some graphs if you want to, or I can stop talking and let people ask questions.
Do you want to quickly run through the graphs and some of the information just as a point of reference? Because obviously if that information is available in the documents, we can find it as a source, but it might be useful for you to give a commentary on things to look for in terms of the information. Sort of highlighting the point that Emma was saying before, and that there's an awful lot of information out there, but we need to know what we're looking for in terms of what is being presented to us, and it almost certainly what is not being presented in terms of the information. Would that be quite helpful to people? Can I get some thumbs up if you want to go through that? Oh, Tina's got a finger up. Yeah.
I was going to say, yeah, I find that helpful purely because what we found, Catherine, was that the word use, the way they phrased a sentence, everything mattered. You know, like fracking will not harm your community water supply was what they said. Yeah. But the fact that it would harm the local groundwater, seep into the aquifers, that isn't your local water supply. So once you realize that you have to analyze every single sentence and go, why did you categorize it? You know, take away the category, did it have an impact elsewhere? It's finding those waffle words and the way that they work around stuff. I think maybe I had a real bonus because I've been in marketing before, but the marketing techniques are quite skilled and they've got all the money they want to throw at this. So it must be, do you find that? I would assume it's the same with Emma and Jude, that we keep encountering this waffle that sounds fabulous if you want to only hear the surface, but you need to tear apart. And that does take some skill. That's why the diversity in your group, you know, hopefully that pans that out. What did you find with that?
So, of course, my report is more about the presentation of our line, the green solution, rather than analysing or critiquing the fake stuff. There is a lot of fake stuff. I mean, one of the things I was going to say was, because I was inspired, Tina, by your talking about how the women have a particular way of responding, and one of the things that I've noticed is that you'll get a lot of pushback from what I call technophiles, the people who think that there's a magic science fiction solution just around the corner. Some of it is, oh, nuclear power is absolutely essential. We need new nuclear power because actually we're going to need more power. So the assumption is you never cut anything. You always want more technology, so you always need more power. So of course you want all these renewables, but you want the nuclear on top because you want just to grow how much we're using. And the people who want the very, very high speed train of HS2 can't understand why we would be against that, because they assume that faster is better and more people traveling is better, and you must go as fast as possible. And because the airlines are still going to be there, you've got to beat the airlines and so on. They can't envisage a world in which the airlines might not be there, or they might not be allowed to do domestic flights, in which slow travel is actually preferable, that you can sit down on the train and work on it, that you don't actually want to be going there in a shorter time because you've got all the time in the world if you're not traveling every day, etc., etc. So they are stuck, and I think these are particularly men. I have not found any women in the technophile group that are saying no, we want the nuclear, no, we want the HS2, we want the short ride and the fast machine stuff. That's all men, and the people who can envisage a happier world in which people had more time at home, in which you didn't rush about, in which slow travel was enjoyable, in which you could have long holidays and 4-day working weeks and all the things that would actually make life better, those are going to be the women. So you have to have the narrative that comes out of the women. Dawn, what? you want me to stop?
Yeah, can I just say, I would totally agree with that. One of the things about the nuclear power is when the government under Blair decided that they needed new nuclear power, there seems to be a thing, you know, governments like big shiny projects. They like building new things, you know, insulating homes. They can't point at that and go, we did that, we built this thing. They like huge things, huge projects, you know. Yeah, they do. Yeah, okay. But when they decided that they wanted to build these nuclear power stations, they commissioned a report to find out how much power we're going to need, you know, the forecast of how much energy we're going to need. But actually what they did was they said, we need 60 gigawatts of new power. How are we going to get this? How many nuclear power stations will we need for this? So where should we build them? And the report took as a start, we need this much power. So where should we put the nuclear power stations? And there was actually a guy from Leiston who did a lot of work on this, who wrote a report called The Corruption of Governance, who looked into this. Where did they get the figures from? And he went to Parliament and put it before Parliament, and it was kind of, it didn't go anywhere. But you read that report and you see actually there is nothing underneath this. The forecast of how much energy we are going to need are really flawed, and that has been proven to be true because the amount of electricity that was projected that we're going to need is way off. It's way lower than was projected. And the other thing I was going to say about women is one of the reasons why I think this is important for Green Party women is I think you're absolutely right. There's far more women who are against nuclear weapons and nuclear power, because obviously the two are intricately linked. They're far more against it than men, but women tend to be far more risk averse. You know, it's well borne out in studies. Women see the risks and the dangers far more than men, you know, and about the techno fixes, I completely agree. The number of times I've had people, now it's small modular reactors. Oh, small modular reactors are going to be the solution. Thorium's going to be the solution. And you sort of say like, well, or nuclear fusion, you know. Okay, when is this going to happen? 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line? We need it now, you know.
Exactly. There are always things that could happen if you could just solve this thing. So hydrogen, for example, great deal of enthusiasm from men for hydrogen because, oh, it's a perfectly clean fuel, you know, burns and produces nothing except water. Yeah, that's great, but how do you make your fuel? Oh, never mind about that. Eventually we'll be able to make it. We might even be able to make it in a way that yields heat in the process. Oh yeah, sure. How can you do that? You know, that it's completely pie in the sky. So, so these things are they're put into the future, but they're just out of reach, and so we go on polluting until, you know, because we'll be able to solve it sometime. Yeah. So I don't know whether I can try sharing. So. Does anybody want to see any graphs or not? I think maybe it's more interesting just to talk. You can look at the graphs. Yes, everybody wants to see the graphs. Well, somebody wants to see the graphs. Okay, so let's have a look.
While you're doing that, I just wanted to add that I think you're right. It's creativity we need, you know. The government's so focused on getting back to normal, but normal was so bad.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is that one opportunity in an era to say, quick, we've all changed so quickly. And we were very quick to adapt, I think. And to seize that moment and say, look, while we're in this adaptability, malleable state, let's do something with all that in this country and do something good and positive. And you look to New Zealand and you see how she's handling it. You think, God, if only we had that ability to think beyond. And there just doesn't seem to be that. And everything, because the Conservatives are in charge, is a Conservative decision, not a Parliament one. Everything's just a Tory line. It's so sad.
Even Labour are obsessed with keeping the people in their jobs.
Yeah.
So they're in favour of things like the furlough scheme. The point of the furlough scheme is to keep the same businesses running and
Exactly.
keep the same people in the same jobs and get them back into the same jobs afterwards. It has no creativity about it and no forward looking about whether in fact those might not be the industries you want to prop up. It's all about, and now of course they create a narrative that says, oh look, you know, these people are going to lose their jobs, we've got to bail out the airlines, we've got to get foreign holidays up and running again, because how are these people going to have jobs otherwise? Well, the answer is, how are these people going to have jobs when you're going to invent the jobs that we actually want for the future? You're not going to reinvent the old jobs. Forget those, they were in the wrong thing. That's why we were in the crisis that we were in.
You look at how during war they adapted all the factories to start making other components, and we're very quick to be able to do that, but it's just all dependent on the will of the government. And it's such a shame, because we should be looking to, you know, we've got an energy college here that was built specifically to train people to do fracking, and now it's laying like, you know, a dead thing at the end of the road, wondering what on earth it's going to grow up and be.
Training for doing improvements to the grid and for renewable energy. I mean,
exactly,
no-brainer, right?
Yep.
Okay, so here's my picture of what East Anglia will look like, and you can see Sizewell there with a little red blob in the sea, where this is for 2050 if we don't do anything about our sea level rise. So obviously there's a real threat to the nuclear installations. There's Bradwell down there, it also has a little red thing. And the wind farms are shown on the in the green in the sea. And you can see that we've got masses of those, and there's ample. The other thing to say about the east of England is that it's one of the sunniest, it's probably the sunniest part of the country, solar. And the project that I've been beginning on, and I'm just sort of part way into, is trying to develop the idea of solar panels on church roofs to create local sort of circular systems with an electric vehicle that stores energy and solar power that powers both the heating of the church to get it off gas and also the heating of other village buildings, for example, the school or the church hall, and also local homes, and bring profits into the community. So I'm going to work with the church, I hope, on that. This is the falling energy trajectory that we've had up till now. You can see the yellow bit is the projection for what we think the current situation is. And the darker green is the fall that we need if we're to achieve what we need to achieve to meet the Paris Agreement targets. That's not enough, of course, because unless you actually stop aviation from increasing, which it is at the moment, aviation is not included in this, nor the shipping. So these things are actually rising in their emissions. So they're undermining this fall that's shown here on the graph. But the fall that we need is dramatic and much higher than what it's, much faster, much speedier fall than what we've seen. And of course, some of the fall is engineered by offshoring, like importing goods that would have been made here and importing produce from heated greenhouses and so on. So the emissions are still going on somewhere, they're just not on our territory. So that's the situation. So this graph shows the proposals that we're putting forward in the report. So the yellow bits that you can see are as we insulate houses to reduce the amount of energy required for heating a house. The light green is the reduction achieved by replacing the heating system with a heat pump. and the dark green is the residual gas and oil. So the plan would be that we would already have done some work by the end of 2020. I fear this is not going to be so, but if you look at the 2020 graph, that shows already a little bit of improvement as a result of starting on the insulation and the conversion to heat pumps. But even if you picked off the easiest things to do, like say insulating council houses, which councils could access and do the work on, you're not going to manage it by the end of this year unless you actually start now, or preferably several months ago. And to achieve what's shown there for 2027 would involve much more intervention to get private rentals and private houses done as well, and that involves various kinds of political tasks, which is why I said, what do we need? Well, we need various incentives and regulations to deliver the insulation targets. And so on. So that's just a summary of some of the things we need. What are the benefits of doing this? Well, massive, right? The sort of benefits that we probably in this group will appreciate, but the economists, the old-fashioned economists, don't really understand because they measure things in other terms. But individuals being able to live in a warm house for not much cost, the elimination of fuel poverty, the saving on travel time I've talked about, reclaiming the streets, fewer cars, being able to run, play, cycle, walk, and so on, enjoying the clean air and clear skies. I mean, it's been wonderful, to my mind, seeing no planes in the sky, and also the lack of air pollution during the coronavirus lockdown. So, and you know, there have actually been fewer deaths from other causes during lockdown, surprisingly, given that they were afraid that there would be a lot of suicides and so on. There have also been fewer stress-related deaths, and I think travel time and long hours of work have a lot to answer for. That's probably what I want to say.
Catherine, can I ask a question? Are there any groups at the minute who are actually organising with the government this kind of micro community level of energy production for things like on-site wind turbines for specifically for community groups?
Now that is a good question.
Especially Dawn about that when we finish, we should.
What? So I think there are a number of local community projects of this sort. There are a number of references in the report, but I don't know off by heart whether there's anything national. It's, I mean, obviously it would be really good to get the government onto this. It might be worth looking at the thing that Caroline Lucas has just circulated called Reset, which is the survey to get people's views on what we ought to be doing post-COVID. And I think that the kind of projects that she and Clive Lewis and people's cross-party thing are putting forward there, you know, this is perhaps the best hope we've got for getting something going at a national level to institute these kinds of changes. But I'm not sure how much people are talking about the sort of localized stuff, which is why I'm trying to work with the Church of England to get it done on the parish scale, because they have a building in every parish, and every bit of the UK is in a parish. So there's, well, Church of England, of course, just covers England, but it could then be extended to Scotland and Wales and so on. so, you know, you've got an organisation there that has a target of 2030 for its carbon neutral, but it could do that in collaboration with its communities and do more than just look at its own carbon footprint, but help the communities themselves to get something out of turning their church organisation into a carbon neutral or other or rather electricity generating system.
The difficulty seems to be in who is taking the lead on organising it, because obviously if you're doing it as an individual, if I want to put a wind turbine outside my house, I have to fund it privately, I have to do all the maintenance, then private subcontracted. Whereas ideally you want to be able to tap into an organisation that can do that for you, and it takes away all the stress and responsibility, and also it means it's all the maintaining and all the maintenance is being done by someone else. And I think that's a huge barrier to people engaging with the technology, is that they see it as like, I'll have to build it from scratch. And
That's right. Yeah, no, you need an organisation and some kind of system that would enable such enterprises to get going. And you don't want it to be single households, you want it to be at least streets and that sort of thing. It needs to be sort of groups of people, and I guess, I don't know whether anybody's got any suggestions in the chat, but I think it's something where we need organizations or companies to be taking it up. But you don't want a company involved, because then they will siphon off the profits for their shareholders. So you know, it could be done at council level. I mean, there are various council organisations such as Smart Switch and so on, where they try to get good energy deals. If they were putting their money into developing community solar for every street, that would also work.
Yeah, I'm just going to want to say, I think there's also barriers in terms of legislation, because I think in this country, the government it's quite difficult to get sort of micro things connected to a grid. You have to pay a lot of money. And I think, although I don't really know much about this, I've just kind of heard it in the background, that there's a bill going through Parliament to try and make it easier for local groups to do things like connect to the grid. Because in this country, you can't just kind of go, okay, we're going to build a wind turbine and connect it to the grid. You have to pay a ton of money to do it, and there's all sorts of legislation in the way to stop you doing it.
Yeah,
and I think maybe we need to do that.
They used to have the feed-in tariffs where you actually gain some money back from supplying your electricity, and you know that sort of thing needs to be returned, so it's worth investing in doing so. But part of the problem is that the grid is actually overburdened, and will become more overburdened if we increase the amount of electricity that we're pumping into it from wind farms and so on. So part of the reason for going for the localized solutions is that you have your local storage and your local usage from a local solar installation or wind turbine. Then you can bypass the blockages on the grid, because I don't know whether you're aware that sometimes they have to turn off the wind turbines in very windy weather, because the grid can't cope with the amount of power being generated. And there might be somewhere up in Scotland that needs power and has no wind, but they can't let the wind in East Anglia produce the power and pass it up to Scotland. Actually, more often it's the reverse, because they've got a lot of wind turbines up in Scotland and very little demand, but the grid is not capable of carrying the power that is needed down to the south of England. So you've got a demand for power in one part and an overproduction in another part, but because of the limitations of the grid, and of course you could invest in improving the grid, but one of the more convenient ways is to make it more resilient by having more localized areas. Of course, you're then vulnerable to the days when there's no sun or whatever, but if you combine it with storage facilities, then you've got local resilient units that don't require the grid.
Catherine,
Okay.
is it free to, I was going to say, just
Sorry,
quickly talk about some of the storage methods that are currently in play, just so we've got an idea of roughly the new technology that's on the market for storage, because obviously this is a huge issue in that we have sun during the day, but most people use their televisions and cookers and kettles at night time when they're sort of cooking. So how do we get around that problem of when the power is available and when we actually need it?
Well, there is actually been quite a few studies done about this, and I quite like Catherine's idea. You know, the idea of the electric vehicles that we have being used as batteries. You know, that's quite a standard thing that you could do. Charge your cars, and then use those as storage batteries. There are lots of different ways that are coming out for storage. You know, like you know, pumping water and using that, pumping out that uphill and then letting it go downhill.
Pumping water is a really old one that they've been doing for hundreds of years, and you know, if they'd invested some effort into working out comparable solutions for flat parts of the country, we'd be well away. I mean, you can wind up a spring. It's old clockwork, right? You wind up a spring until it's really tight, and then you let it go, and all the energy that you put into winding it up unwinds it again. There are loads and loads of things that you can do, or you can heat up a large pool of water, which then stores the heat, and you can use it for heat or for power. I mean, you know, masses and masses of things that you can do.
Yeah, I just want to say as well about one of the things about nuclear power is that it is really incompatible with renewables, because nuclear power is either on or off, and you can't switch it on and off quickly. Okay, you can't just wind down a nuclear power station. It takes sort of 3 or 4 days to take it offline, unless it's an emergency. And so what's happening at the moment is when it's been sunny, EDF have been paid to actually switch off their nuclear power station, or what happens is the wind turbines are switched off because the nuclear power is inflexible. And when it comes to heat, you know, 2/3 of the energy generated at a nuclear power station is a waste product. It is put into the sea because you can't, it's a waste product, and it's heating the water up, it's heating the sea up, and you know, it's just ridiculous. So yeah, I don't know how long people want to go on for, because we're already sort of running over time, and I don't know if people want to continue the discussion, or if people have got more questions. I don't want to kind of rush people or hijack it. I'm just aware that I'm not very good at keeping time, and we are running over.
There's quite a few questions in the chat box, but if people just sort of raise their hands, so we can get an idea if they want them raised in the discussion. What I'm doing is just trying to keep little kind of notes on what the speakers were saying, so when we look at the chat, we can kind of follow where we were in the discussion. But anyone got any direct questions they want to ask any three of the speakers that we've had today? Either just sort of hands up, or just to unmute yourself and ask the question. We'll just make it sort of an open discussion now, I think might be useful. In that case, can I ask the question of all three participants, the speakers? How do we actually move on this in terms of Green Party Women being a sort of sub-political organisation? How do we lay claim to this problem and say, right, okay, we're going to do something about it. We are going to set up a consortia of energy providers for, you know, women's groups across the country, or, you know, Green Party groups that are led by women. How do we actually sort of do that? Who do we need to talk to in order to get this kind of thing off the ground? Presumably we need to sort of start emailing individual activists and say, we want to do this, but how do we actually turn it from a concept into something that is a viable project that we can then start applying for funding for, or even who do we then start applying to funding for? How do we make this real if we wanted to do it?
Well, I guess that we would need to identify some creative individual who wants to sort of take that as their project and make it happen, and be a lead on it. And gather the enthusiasts to work together. What do you think?
I think one of the key things we've got to do is identify what it is that is our target and define it more clearly. It's so very difficult to say there's so much bad, isn't there? And how do we classify that? First is to identify and make clear to others what it is we are tackling. And I don't know, because I mean, this has been a really amazing experience being in lockdown and seeing a broader picture of everything that's going on and working out when we come out of this, which direction do I personally want to take as an activist? Because living a life of purpose and getting things stopped and getting good things going, I can't imagine living any other way, certainly not under someone's fluorescent tube and being paid. This matters. And I don't know, I don't actually have an answer, because I'm racking my brain to work out how we do this, because we have the worst voting system we could have to give us a chance of getting any sort of government that's going to be representative of us. So does that mean that we can't look at it as that we can tackle this in government because we don't have a foot in? We can't get into that room. So maybe that's one that we say that we can't get in there, so the voting system's bad. So as Green Party women, I think as a party in general, I've always felt that the Green Party should be called the opposition to all the other parties, because we aren't about politics in the same way that Labour and Conservatives are. We are about a different sort of politics altogether that isn't really about politics. It's about worldwide life management and how we do that fairly and justly and come out of this with something to lead the future generations. So maybe that's how we phrase the conversation. I know Emma mentioned earlier about the issues with mentioning things like even mentioning climate and certain words that put people off. And we were the same. I talk about environment. I very rarely say the word climate because people get confused. There's been so much mishmash of information and people think about climate in very simplistic ways. So I think, first of all, defining what it is we seek to achieve, which is a greater conversation and the seizing of an opportunity to change the way we currently live and bring in better ways. And I don't really know. All I know, though, is that I think the people who will make that happen will definitely be women. And I think that as many women's groups as we could get together with will make all the difference. I mean, for us, it was a shortcut when we were traveling the country to find, you know, we'd set up, like how Emma said, you know, you go to an area and you're seen as outsiders. But I try and find women's groups or go into their shopping centres on a Saturday and hand out leaflets to women who were shopping with their kids and stuff, because you could always get them on board a lot more easily. And then I wonder about cross-party women, you know, are there, particularly now when you look at the Labour Party and the disarray it's in, would it look good, bad or not if we cooperate with women from other parties in order to achieve maybe set goals? You know, do we choose one thing and say, right, we've got all of this agreement from all of these women in all of these groups and parties, we would like this to happen, and does that give us a bigger voice? Do we start finding our 51% of the nation rather than it's Greens, it's Labours, it's Blues, it's WIs or whatever? Do we find the woman in each of the women in our country and try and get them to come on board with a green agenda, not a green political agenda? But I know that doesn't really help and it doesn't really answer the question, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, like, I'm so focused on stopping the power station, I can't really, you know, think about much else. But I would say what you've just said, Tina, I will give a plug to Andrea Carey-Fuller, who is leading the 50-50 campaign and the Ask Her to Stand campaign, you know, to try and get more women elected, because we do need to do that. We need to have a seat at the table. I also totally agree, Tina, that, you know, going out and leafleting, at the end of the day, it is those interactions, those personal interactions that are really important, you know. And we used to do petitions and I wasn't even really bothered about who signed the petition or how many names you got on the petition. The petition was a way to talk to people. That was the goal, you know. So yeah, but otherwise I ain't got a clue.
Exactly, it was excuses to engage. Sorry, Catherine. Oh, Carolyn Pickering's been waiting.
Yeah, that's all right. Yes, cross-party working is absolutely essential. With a government with 80% majority, we've got to get Tory women on board as well. And I don't like this tribalism of politics. People are people, women are women. Women are much more important in this fight, I think. And the other thing to do, of course, is to think about a bit of a longer term future and education. Start educating the children in school about this, so that, especially, and students too, especially, I mean, I'm not saying how to do it, I'm just saying what to do, And it's always much more useful to say how to do it, but you've got to decide what to do at first. So students, universities, schools, secondary schools, start educating them in the way that they could have a much better life. And the other thing I wanted to say, which has probably been said already, you have to stop evaluating jobs in the way we're doing it now and decide what are real jobs and necessary jobs and not jobs just for their own sake. But that goes back to, I think, Catherine's point about travelling. And stop travelling, stay where you are. It's lovely. I have loved lockdown. I haven't had to go abroad once. It's been brilliant. Thank you.
Just to pick up on
I
that.
I hope you all heard that, did you?
Yes, yes, yes. And I just wanted to pick up on the idea that we should tell the young people what to think, because I think in many cases the young people are managing to tell us what to think. And there are a lot of young people who really get it and will hopefully keep their right thinking. But the problem seems to be that once people get into a job, they get wound up in this kind of capitalist thought mode. And they're also, of course, I mean, the ones we're talking about who get it are not everybody, and there are the people who are indoctrinated with the we must have a nuclear power station in this village because that's where you're going to get your jobs. So the teacher's actually telling them that they should be in favour of the nuclear power station, which is utterly awful drivel. So there is a problem there about the misconception about jobs. But
sorry to interrupt you. And also, it would be good to get more involved with the Black Lives Matter movement too, because they are left out of everything. I was at another Green Party meeting a few days ago, talking about, it was Caroline Lucas, talking about how to involve every ethnic, not minority, majority, minority, every ethnic group in these, because they are suffering more than we are, and they matter very much too.
Do we have anybody in the audience now who'd like to speak on the Black Lives issue?
A little, I guess. I think it's, acknowledging the work that Greens of Colour are doing, and just like this forum, they're also extending their reach now through the social media and otherwise. So I think this group and Greens of Colour could actually complement each other very well. And I think it is incredibly important, but also to identify the people in these diverse communities that are out there, are speaking up. There was the Climate Reframe, which was a very, very good piece of work that highlighted a number of people in the UK from different backgrounds. So perhaps I can share the link there. But you're absolutely right. But I think it's also worth noting and thinking about some of the movements that have existed before Black Lives Matter, and ensure that, those ones also rooted in, for example, reparatory justice. And let's not forget, some of these movements are calling for, the British government to acknowledge the harm that's been done, not just to people, but to planet. So ecocide is very much part of this argument that people from the global south are bringing. So I guess it's just a case of sharing information and educating ourselves in terms of what is happening and how we can align our different elements of the movement, really.
Can we take a question from Claudine? I think you had your hand up there, Claudine.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say, I just thought I was the only black person, so I had to talk, not really. But all I wanted to say that, I think it's actually quite important to recognize, the global south actually suffers more with changes, because actually all production is actually made in those areas, and they actually get to, the lopping of the trees, the banning of the forests in the Amazon. So these are actually quite important things. They impact people in those areas. And, my sadness is always around what actually has happened. We have not dealt with poverty. So social justice goes really hand in hand with environmental issues, and nobody talks about it. So, that's why the environmental movement, or the climate movement, is probably seen as only relating to middle class community, whereas actually if you really look at the impacts of all the changes, the Bayers and Monsantos, the impact that they're having in those countries, I mean, you know, the GMO, I mean, this is really about the environment, it's about food, it's about health, it's about provision of continuing, you know, life as we know it in this world, to continue longer. But actually, if we don't actually deal with those issues, actually this is gonna really devastate everybody. But the first people that will suffer are always the ones actually that at the margins, where actually they have less to live on originally. So it's actually quite important to really bring those voices in to actually try and actually show, you know, how can we in the West really try and improve those. So my views are very different to everybody else, but I think actually we can leverage technology to move forward, because actually we already have an opportunity that we can use technology to actually emphasize the issues and actually remove charities. I hate charities, I'm sorry to say that, but actually they've had such a hold on communities where they're not doing anything. All they've been doing is actually siphoning off the money and not actually working to support the people. So I think actually we could use a blockchain to, actually if you go to Africa, M-Pesa, I don't know if anybody comes from or has ever been to Kenya. So M-Pesa is actually like a mobile money that is actually used in quite lots of African countries. It's fantastic. So you can give directly. So we really should actually be focusing on actually how do we empower people, in particular empower women in these countries that actually will shift the world to, you know, where we won't actually have poverty. Well, that's my just little take on it.
Just to support that, in the anti-fracking movement, we deliberately tied in with the indigenous people, like in America. We're also working alongside the families, the grandmothers in Vaca Muerta in Argentina, because we got rid of Quadrilla, but they just caught them. So, and also we're acutely aware that, yeah, there is a privilege. I'm not going to get shot whilst I'm protesting. But I know of so many activists who their families are either thrown in prison, they got people being shot, that I think that we have to fight twice as hard for the grandma in Argentina because she can't stand up like I can. So we made a point of uniting our campaigns, showing that, like, say, for instance, our local MP here in the Files near Blackpool, he is the same envoy who went to Argentina and made a trade deal and lent British money to frack this town. So constantly raising their plight alongside ours. So maybe it's a kind of a pairing thing where we make it clear that me as a white grandma in the north of England and someone who's suffering the same fate elsewhere are no different in our motivation for protecting our children, and to constantly go back to that human that we are that links us long beneath our skin. You know, but that it's awful that the way that because of colonization and the empire, that we managed to make people feel like they could be beaten so far down that they can't raise back up again and fight for themselves. So I think that's important, that we don't leave anyone behind, that we try and make sure we check for our equivalents in other areas who are not able to raise their voices, and we raise our voices for them.
Fantastic point. Can I take a question from Brita? I think you had your hand up, Brita.
It's a little bit, I would like to raise something that is Green Party internal more. So maybe a little later would be better, because you seem to be going in one direction now that is really important. So when maybe you want to elaborate more on that, and then I chip in with my Green Party question. Or should I do it now?
I think you should do it now, because, you know, we need to end this meeting at some point. Sorry.
Okay. So,
you know.
So I've just realized. The reason why I didn't meet this, I didn't join this meeting earlier was because I'm Britta. Hi, by the way. I'm on GPEX, the campaigns coordinator, and I've just I'm restanding again, and we have achieved a decent amount of stuff. Basically, I wanted to get this climate campaign off the ground, and we even got a campaigner in the background, and then we're basically always going back to zero. And I'm very happy to, at a different point in time, to talk more about it. But so I'm sitting here now on a Sunday morning, and I'm trying to read through all the GPEX papers that make so that I can make the case for climate campaigning stronger. And I've realized, so the party has been growing massively over the last 2 years in terms of staff, organizational level. And this time I'm standing alone. I'm quite well linked also with Dawn, for example, but I realize I can't do it alone. I can't do it alone. I need, and preferably more women who help me to get also through all of this documentation stuff, the internal logic. There's, we are going full steam ahead into elections 2024 MPs. There's several parallel streams that are going on would have to do with fundraising. There's lots and lots of good reasons for all of these things that are happening, but I will not be able, no one will be able to do this alone, because every other position on GPEX is linked with other, basically with either staff or GPEX internally. Leadership is several people, all of the groups that are on GPEX are several people, finance is several people, campaigns is standing totally alone. And I just realized one of the reasons why it's difficult to speak up is because I'm feeling like a constant failure, because I just cannot get on top of all of this, and it's so difficult. So if we can find because the next months are going to be so incredibly crucial in terms of, we're going to fix the budget for the upcoming year. We're going to basically link structures in new projects and campaigns that will be leadership, that will be Caroline Lucas, that will be kind of fundraising, all of these things which will take up a huge amount of resources, and campaigns is not going to happen. So if maybe we could have a meeting on that separately, is kind of how we can grow Green Party campaigns properly, because I can tell you honestly, this is not going to happen. And not only because it's a lack of goodwill, it's because it's like several kind of admin tanks that are rolling through the structure. And I'm sitting on this bicycle, like incredibly eco-friendly, but they will just, it's just, I'm kind of outnumbered, out-weaponed, out everything.
What I was going to respond to that is that certainly within Green Party Women, we've become more active in engaging with the membership since we've managed to get our database of members back. So we've only had it about 6 weeks, but we have sent out regular newsletters. And what I think we need to start doing now is starting to consolidate our membership. We currently have about 6,200 people on our mailing list. Now, we don't need everyone to be super active all the time. All we really need is a core of about 15 or 20 activists who can deliver on a regular basis. And what I would sort of put a call out to people who are in this group is that we should start consolidating that in order to form a subgroup of Green Party Women on campaigns to support what Britta is doing on the GPEX, because that means we can also run it through our own network and distribution. And what I would say is anyone who's interested in doing that, or has a friend or a colleague in their local party who's part of the Green Party Women group, or who even is part of the Green Party and needs to be brought into that group, if we can perhaps just sort of add details in the chat, or if you can email us, and then we can actually form a subgroup to start tackling this, because the difficulty is, in terms of how our party is structured, is that we grew very rapidly in a very short space of time. And in order to accommodate that, we have quite a lot of management and sort of paid staff, but they're working in a centralised London office for essentially what is the London focus of the organisation. So unless you are in that London-centric position, you tend not to get the support, and certainly we as a Liberation group or affiliate group have found that we haven't had the same kind of levels or same access to members of staff that is sort of being handled by the majority or the main focus in the party. So we just need to readjust that. We just need to make sure that if we want to run campaigns on energy or locally sourced energy or however we want to do it, that we start self-organising and we just doing it. I think there's a feeling that someone else will always kind of try to solve the problem. And what we absolutely need to realise is the buck stops here. We are the people who need to organise, and we need to, certainly the three fantastic speakers that have, spoken earlier today have given us that insight that you just have to do it. So anyone who wants to get involved, put your name in the side chat or get in touch with us, and let's actually make this sort of, Green Party Women campaign subgroup a reality, and then that will make my friend Rita very happy. So any further questions on this? Emma, any more questions? Any more hands up? Catherine, would any of the speakers like to give a closing summary of things that they would like to see, or points that we need to sort of focus on now? Would that be helpful? Emma?
I would just like to say, at the moment, what's happening with Sizewell, I haven't, because my internet's a bit rubbish, but we have got a website which I will be sending out, and maybe I can put it in the Green Party Women newsletter, and that will make people read the newsletter. Okay, I'll put further information in that. But at the moment, the DCO submission is in, the application is in. So this is kind of a crucial period at the moment, because basically it's going through the planning, and within about a year they could start building it. So if anyone's interested in that, I shall be putting it in the newsletter. Please look out for it. And if you want to write to object to the planning, then I will put information on how to do that. But that would be really useful for people to kind of get a bit involved at this time, because it's quite crucial at this time. Okay. And thanks for coming, everybody. It's been really, really great. Yeah, really great to see you.
Yeah, wonderful to see everybody. I don't think I need to say any more. I've probably talked too much already, but it's been fantastic and really inspiring, and I think we should change the world.
That sounds like a very good place to end it.
I just wanted to say thank you to Dawn for all the work you put in, and Emma. You really have changed the way Green Party Women. I love that you're just seizing it, running with it, and making it up as you go along. And we'll all adapt with you. And I just really couldn't be more happy that we've got the leadership in with the Green Party Women that we have. Thank